Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. If you desire to intimately connect with yourself, significant other, children, family, friends, community, and higher power, then this is the show for you. We explore intimate topics, inspiring life stories, spirituality, and insightful tips on strengthening relationships. The show is hosted by Dr. April and her co-host, Coach K. Let's get this episode of the Bringing Intimacy Back show started. We share with you today the secret power to intimacy to create the life you love or love the life you create. Now here's your host, Dr. April, and her co-host, Coach K.
Welcome to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. Sorry, it's just going to be me today. Coach K is out at a conference, but I have a wonderful topic that we're going to talk about, which is so healing. It's how nature has a healing power. And that may be like, wow, what does that actually mean? Well, that's what we're going to learn about today, is how can nature really sometimes heal us or help us bring us closer to intimacy with ourselves, with others, spirituality, and all forms of intimacy. So I'm really excited about hearing about this topic for so many ways. And I was just thinking about this past weekend, Labor Day weekend, and we did the boat, and I was out there on the water. And for me, water has been very healing for me, which is interesting because at one point in my life, I was scared of deep water. And I did some work on myself through EMDR, which is great, a form of therapy, to be able to just be out there with water. And being out there with water, or if you're on a mountain, or even if you're in a valley, to sit there and just hear. And to be fully present. Because many times in our lives, we're so busy doing so much stuff that we don't take time to just breathe. Which sometimes we need to do to heal. Because life throws so much stuff at us, whether it's job loss, miscarriage, death, or even a relationship that breaks up. And sometimes I know I've been there, and I'll later on share a little bit more of my story, but your heart is breaking and you're like, oh my gosh, you just can't take any more stimulants of any sort. You know, people talking, the TV, the variety, the stuff at home. Sometimes just sitting in nature and just being at peace is sometimes what you need. So I have a special guest. His name is Mike Martin, and he's going to definitely be talking about that. Of course, here on the show, we always highlight a nonprofit. And this nonprofit is kind of fitting into what we're talking about today. It's called Lightening the Path. And this is a nonprofit organization that helps empower people to alleviate poverty. Because there's many people out there that are having a hard time making it, whether they're living on the streets or whether they're living in some kind of assistant, whatever, and they can't pay bills or help their kids. Lightning Power empowers people. It helps people to teach them self-reliance and to teach them that they can do it, because in everything, it's about the mindset. And, you know, when I talk about mindset, we can really, truly understand our mind a lot more when we actually spend time in nature. Because one of the things that I'm just going to mention, just because it popped in my mind, is we have so many thoughts in our mind. And our thoughts are kind of like, here in Florida, we have tons of clouds that come and go. And that's how thoughts go. They just come and go. But sometimes when a thought comes in that's somewhat negative, we pull it down instead of just letting it flow, just like the clouds. We pull it down, we focus on it, and it really just tears us up. So when you're in nature and you realize that things can be still, things can just flow through, things are, how can I put it? Serene and at peace. That's how we're going to work through and also understand our mind is how to bring peace to it, how to even just do breath work and just breathing in the air. So I'm excited to hear about Mike Martin. He's an expert at this through his own experience and through doing what he does for a number of years. So we're going to have him back on once we take this break. We'll be back in a moment.
In a world where stress and anxiety seem to be constant companions, finding a safe space is essential. Welcome to Therapist in Sarasota, where we hear you and we care about you. Take the first step towards healing and transformation. Contact us today to schedule your appointment. Your mental wellness matters.
Welcome to the Bring In Intimacy show, where intimacy is wonderful. Yes, welcome, Mike.
April, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yes. So, Mike Martin, as I was saying earlier, I guess from understanding you had gone through a transition in a relationship of a divorce, and your heart and mind, and I'm assuming everything else was just overwhelming. And so tell me what led you down this track.
You put that a lot more eloquently than I ever could, because it was really a matter of life's horrible medicine, where you go through life and you jump into the distractions, because I've always had a battle with depression and anxiety. I always found a way to distract myself, not have to deal with that. That led to 2 marriages, which both failed, and kind of staircased on each other, reaching into that cloud of the storm, where ultimately I found myself homeless, facing that second divorce.
Mm.
And the last things that were said to my face was, I had nothing to offer my soon-to-be ex-wife or the rest of my family. So that led me to a suicide attempt. And I woke up the next morning and I stumbled back to my truck, turned on one of my favorite hunting-based podcasts. Just happened to be featuring an author talking about his new Stoic philosophy book at the time. And he started talking about these different quotes from Marcus Aurelius, namely, the adversity that you face in life is an opportunity to highlight and showcase who you are. And that hit me as a father, because
Right.
those words that were said the night before, had that worked, that's what would have been left. If I could rebuild myself and turn it into something new, I would teach my kids so much more. And that's exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I kind of can relate. I know after a relationship ended a few years ago, Mike will be back with us in a moment. After a relationship ended a few years ago, I found myself out. I love water. Okay. So I went out by the water and I was just questioning, who am I? I thought this was the plan. God, why isn't this happening? I believe in a higher power. I was just like so frustrated and I just poured it out into nature. And then that was healing in some aspect.
There's a beautiful little practice that I do with people when I take them out on a hike. Is before we even start, when we're standing at the trailhead, I'll have everybody kneel down and just pull up a handful of grass,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of sit there and hold it for a minute, for the exact concept of what you were talking about. You visualize all those feelings and all those things you're carrying going into the blade of grass. Then you place it back on the ground, back onto Mother Earth, where all those things are intended to go. Because we have such a limited carrying capacity, that this is where, when you tap into your relationship with nature, you're able to let those things go. You lighten your load, per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, but also it helps you get quiet to hear yourself.
That's an interesting, as a sportsman growing up, that's an interesting relationship, because before I made this transition and started walking this red road of healing, as I call it, my time in the outdoors with the silence was kind of scary. I was afraid of what would come up. But then as I started diving down the road and learning how to embrace meditation and bring that into my outdoor experience, it taught me to befriend myself.
Mm-hmm. Right, definitely. Because sometimes when you're on that path, there is these rocks, these blending, where people say you're this, or also you think, oh my gosh, I did this when I was younger and I shouldn't have done that, and I'm such a bad person, or the news or whatever. These stumbling blocks. And how do you move past that? And the same thing when you're walking that path of nature.
How do you end up going one foot in front of the other and you build the motivation to keep going? Especially when you're on a trail and you come up to, say, a staircase that holds 100 steps in it, straight up. You're tired already. You're looking at yourself going, man, I can't do this. But then you realize the truck back to the truck, that's just as bad. It's going to be just as difficult because you're just as tired. So you got no other way to go than forward. And these are the kind of things that you learn as you engage with nature and with the world around you, is regardless of how you feel in the moment, those feelings are going to shift and transition. They're only going to stay there for that moment. As we talk now and I look up and I see the clouds and I watch how they come into view and out of view, it's a perfect representation of those feelings, those emotions that we all struggle with. So being able to find a visual aid or a metaphor of such, just like that, it's a powerful tool. It's a huge step in the beginning.
Mike, I'm curious because you talked about you were at the lowest point and there was a suicidal attempt, which means that you weren't really connecting with you. I'd say a house divided. Sometimes I just put it that way.
Oh, I was so disconnected, it wasn't even a house to be divided within, to be honest with you. It was a matter of the fact that my depression has had taken over who I was. And getting fed those words the night before, it made me feel so worthless and so lifeless, and had that essential part of what suicidal ideas are, is the breakdown of coping.
Right.
We just want the feelings to go away. We don't want to die per se, but we don't know any other way to make it stop. And that's where I've learned to develop that practice of meditation, especially in an outdoor environment like this, where there's no judgment. There's nothing I can look at and allow it to feed into those thoughts or ideas. To sit alone and just let that moment roll off your shoulders. And then over time, as it rolls off and you feel stronger, you get to get back on your feet and you get to carry back on with life.
So you say you like those feelings roll off. There's some people who feel like when I have these negative feelings, they're going to stay with me forever. You know what I'm saying? This is how my life is going to be. That's why I cannot. How did you get to that process of this feeling, this thought is too going to pass?
I love sharing this story because it makes all of what we're talking about so easy for somebody else to touch with and identify with. Because I was always caught up in that same framework. And along the early stages of getting back on my feet, I got into talk therapy. And in talk therapy one day, one early session, she brought up the idea of meditation.
Mm.
Now, looking at me, that's not something that anybody would think would be a thing I would do. And that was my point of view. I was like, I'm not shaving my head. I'm
Right.
not going to go buy one of those old chant CDs and this and that.
Yes. Yeah.
And then at the end of that hour, I went around and I picked up my crossbow to take my nightly shooting practice.
Okay.
And it clicked. I'm like, I'm breathing. I'm slowing my thoughts down. I'm doing everything I just fought for the last hour. And that's where I started learning how to focus in on the breath work with intention. And that's one of the things that when we're stuck in a really bad spot is hard to find. But if you're able to just focus in on the movements, the patterns, the fact that you got to walk and find a place to sit down that's comfortable. And then you follow the movement of sitting down, and then you start to feel your breath, feel your body go through the process of inhaling and exhaling and letting go. And that's where you're buying yourself some time to start to almost build yourself a new roadmap, to start to decide how you're going to deal with those feelings. Because one of the things that I think is so important to remind people that are in this position is you're not powerless. You still have a decision. You still have an option. You know, when you're holding those kind of thoughts, there's nobody that's putting it to your head and forcing you to do it. It's the fact that you're losing sight of how to break that cycle and how to bring balance back to your circle. So if you're able to, even if you got to carry something with you, like I, for a long time, carried a rock in my pocket so that I could touch it and remember that I was here present in the moment and I still had a decision. I still had power. Whatever trinket works for you, you know, whatever practice or routine works for you. I'm sitting here in the outdoors. You're sitting there in your room. Those are two completely different things.
Right.
But we're achieving the same goal. And what I'm going and getting to is the fact that regardless of how you got to get there, it's okay.
And folks of you out there listening, what we're really talking about is self-intimacy. You know, and one of the things you said, and I want to reiterate, is these thoughts. And some people think that every thought that comes in their mind is true, but it's really not true. Okay. So in some ways, you know, they always talk about this fake news. Our thoughts sometimes it's fake news. It tells us things that necessarily are not always true, and we got to learn how to decipher that. And that thought, many times the thoughts create a feeling.
Absolutely, they do. And I love the way that you put that. I actually learned that lesson in a way that it stuck through Seneca the Younger, where he wrote about how all of our thoughts are just that. You got to put them up to the test.
Right.
You know, it's a hypothesis. And if you're willing to take the time to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner, the thoughts that you're going to end up utilizing and feeling and then expanding your world with are the thoughts that really speak to your value system. They speak to who you are. They help you to become a better friend to yourself.
And if people out there listening, they're like, well, you guys probably don't have any more bad thoughts. We do. Mike, I'm assuming you have bad thoughts and I have bad thoughts. It's not that we're healed. No, they come and they go. But the one thing you're really also talking about is this thing of mindfulness, being fully present. Because when you're fully present, that's the only thing we can change is this exact moment. That's the only thing you can handle. We can't handle 5 minutes from now because we're not even there. 10 minutes ago, we can't even change any of that. And when you're out in nature, you learn that aspect of being truly mindfulness.
You know, I wrestled a lot with another quote from Seneca about how once a moment is lived, it's then passed off to death. We can never get it back. And, you know, the future, we're not there yet. We still have time to plan. We still have time to observe where we are and utilize the environment around us to shape that moment that's coming into a moment that's going to help us to go forward. And I learned a lot about that through, you know, sitting in a deer stand in this new sort of frame of mind. And another great story that I love to share is how I really learned to put a solid perception on anxiety. Because a few years back, in fact, it was November 15th. It's a date that I remember specifically because that's the height of the deer rut, where all the deer are active. And that particular November 15th, it was extremely cold. There was a blizzard going on. And I had been sitting in the tree all morning. Then about noon, out comes this beautiful young buck that I had never seen before. He had a trophy rack on him and he was just an amazing deer. But there's a caveat to that because I hold myself to the rule that if I've never seen a deer before, I'll never pull and shoot on it. I have to see it a second time in order to attempt to take him. So I'm standing there wrestling with that. I'm like, it's cold out here. It's miserable. This guy's out here making all the mistakes in the world. I can just take him and be done with it. But I'm not. So what do I call myself? A hunter. And then it clicked in my head, in my heart, the way that I've been battling with my anxiety and really struggling to just go through the task of the day. I kind of projected that onto Longhorn, as I named him, where here he is, the height of his breeding season. He's putting himself in all these dangerous positions he normally wouldn't do.
Right.
But in the back of his head, he knows that he can trust himself. If he runs into trouble, he knows what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And now, while an anxiety attack isn't in reality a matter of life and death, it sure feels like it in the moment.
Right.
And then I brought those thoughts back into my heart. And, it was like really eye-opening to realize that if I just looked at it through the eyes of this deer, I too could make my way through an anxiety attack much, much easier, because I know I've got the skill set within me to work my way through the environment.
Wonderful. That's amazing. I'm also wondering, because Mike, you're out there and you're talking about meditation, and some men may think, oh my gosh, he's maybe just a tree loving person who likes to kiss trees, and and that's, as a man, that's going to take away from my manness. I don't know. Yeah.
Not even close. Aside from me, and this is kind of like where it really tripped me out to think about as well, is the great Lakota leader that we all know as Crazy Horse.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that every decision that he made in order to help his people, he would take time to isolate himself and meditate upon the decision.
Right.
Before he would come back and enact whatever the people needed from him. And when I heard that and I thought about that, it really changed my perspective, because there's nothing wrong with taking the time to sit alone in solitude, isolation, whatever you want to put around it, and befriend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Take your time to really understand the feelings and where they come from. And it gets back to, as being a man and getting out in the woods, going out to hunt, you can bring it back into that safe space where it's not really doing anything to your ego or to you mentally. You're observing, you're studying, you're learning. It gets back to that power of observation. And I know I've discovered a lot within my work, especially in the past year, how much we all get hung up on labels.
Mm-hmm.
But the irony to it is the fact that those labels, when you remove them, are almost the exact same patterns and processes.
Right. And basically, when you remove them, you truly get to know yourself and who am I. However,
that's exactly correct.
Yeah, many people are afraid of getting to know themselves because they get stuck in what I call guilt. You know what I'm saying? I can't sit by myself because I don't want to think about what I did when I was 20, 30, whatever. And they hold that. But guilt is nothing. Really, it just, in fact, none of us are perfect anyway. So we all make mistakes.
Well, guilt and mistakes, you can almost tie them into the same thing.
Right.
Because it's a matter of working with the vocabulary that you have at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing, in some shape or form or another, you're doing what you think is best with the data that you have.
Right.
If you've never encountered a situation, if you take out a new job and you go there for the first day, they give you a task and you mess it up, you almost want to blow that off and say, well, I didn't know what I was doing. And it boils down to the same thing with the guilt and the shame that we carry. We attach those labels because that's what we're told we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, the actions behind them are just that. They're uninformed because we haven't built the vocabulary to be able to build the ship yet.
Mm, right. And then once you're able to build this ship or build the vocabulary to build this ship, and really get to know yourself, I do think we're able then to handle more stuff. Have you realized that you're stronger in the mind?
Oh, absolutely. The capacity grows as you put the work in to exercise and make it grow. And the biggest part, emotionally and mentally, that I feel that I've enjoyed the growth in is the change in self-talk.
Mm,
That self-talk, as you improve your vocabulary there, the rest of the world gets much brighter. It's almost like you get out in the wilderness on a trail, a couple hours before daybreak, and it's pitch dark. And in the darkness, you make your way to a mountain, you climb to it, and then you see the most beautiful sunrise of the new day, and you realize that it's a gift,
right.
and it's a gift that you had to earn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I see it also as my people treat you the way you treat yourself.
There's another great metaphor that I love that involves water, actually.
Right.
When you walk up to a river and you look down and you see your reflection,
Right.
you like that. But if there's a ripple in the water that distorts your reflection, you don't like that so much, so you turn away from it.
Mm,
And in our lives, we act out and we build opinions on about people that we see and meet based upon how we feel inside.
mm-hmm.
So if you have a quality about you that I don't like, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be because there's a quality in myself that I'm seeing in you that I don't like.
Right.
And that provides us an opportunity to set our scope on somewhere, to put our efforts to work and build a way to change that vocabulary around ourselves in that avenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things you've said consistently is change the vocabulary.
That was something that was drummed into me through a lot of talk therapy because it gets back to those few key words. I had nothing to offer anybody, including my kids. And to me, when somebody uses words and labels like that to beat you down,
Right.
you may think you're strong enough to push it off for a little while, but eventually, inside you cave.
Mm-hmm.
Those words become your definition of self-talk. So, in my eyes, along my journey, the fact that literally one hatchet swing at a time, I have changed those words is something that I'm extremely proud about. And that's something that I take so much joy and pleasure in putting a hatchet in somebody's hand and teaching them how to chop down a tree in order to build a fire or build a shelter. Because the look and expression in their eyes of satisfaction and knowing that they did something that puts worth of value in their hands, it just sings to my heart. It's like an instant celebration.
Right. So you took what someone said that you had nothing to offer and you dig deep and you went out and now you are having a whole business in some aspect of helping people. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, and of course you helped yourself and have tons of things to offer your kids. Yeah. So tell us about what Mike Martin does now and how he helps people and yeah, what services you can provide for us.
It's funny because I came across this line in a book called The Wind is Your Mother, where the author Bear Hart was talking about when you find your purpose, you stumble into it.
Yes.
And when you reach it, it is the most beautiful and
Mm,
joyful celebration in the world. And what I do is I have a podcast, which is called Project Mindfully Outdoors. And it airs 7 days a week, and it's filled with little tips, tricks, meditations, uplifting things to help you build this hero journey and change the narrative within your voice. But this year, I've been able to go beyond that. And I've been able to connect with people, whether it's getting on a trail and walking a group of people through, introducing them to wilderness-based meditation, or it's an actual long hike where I teach all these unique skills to somebody to build them up that way. The reaction that I get, the response, and seeing that, these little light bulbs go off in their head, again, sings to that celebration. But as the seasons begin to change and the weather starts to deteriorate and get colder, we're moving into actual venues that are hosting us to do all these different live wilderness meditation experiences and introduce these things. But I also offer an online service, almost what people call a coaching service. I call it a guiding service, and we go through guided meditations and different ways that we can help you to change that narrative and start walking the journey of a hero.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mike, for being on the show. You're welcome back here anytime. Definitely, if you're out there listening and you're struggling, whether you're self-talk or struggling with yourself or in your relationship, this is a great place to get started. So thank you, Mike, for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
This has been a pleasure.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll take a break and we'll be back in a short moment.
Are you wanting a vacation in paradise? Vacation to reignite the passion, the desire in your relationship? Vacation counseling is just for you. We are deeply committed to your success as a couple. Our couples counseling retreats are exclusive, effective, and intimate. At Vacation Counseling, you will benefit from a combination of couples counseling, intimacy counseling, and individual counseling while you and your partner enjoy a relaxing vacation in sunny Southwest Florida. If you are interested in vacation counseling, please visit us at vacationcounseling.com for more information on prices and packages.
Welcome back to the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. We were just speaking with Mike Martin about the healing power of nature. And as I was thinking about my own journey, as I said, I was a couple of years ago, well, more than a few years ago, I was ending a relationship and it just was so distraught. And of course, I go out in nature. I go by the water and I pour out my soul and that kind of stuff. But what I also did besides that, I also went on a journey, actually to journey into Costa Rica. And I spent time with myself and with nature. And in spending time with myself and with nature, I realized how, number one, I had kind of lost myself in the relationship. I realized that maybe the relationship was there for that purpose, for being there at that time period, but now I had a new purpose in life. I was actually able to truly hear what my purpose was because I was out in nature. And through counseling in nature, you're able to actually learn how to decipher between negative thoughts, what negative people tell you. You're able to truly hear yourself. So I would definitely suggest checking him out. And again, his website is projectmindfullyoutdoors.co. And he also has a podcast because many times we're like, I'm not sure if I want to check this person out. Well, go listen to the podcast, see if you like him, and then connect with him. I really do think, because when you're truly mindful and you're truly quiet, you can have that connection of yourself, the higher power, the earth, and also it can also bring people together. So definitely check him out. So in the month of September, we've been working on healing. So next Thursday, we're going to do the remarkable healing power of crisis. We have that coming up next Thursday. And September 19th, we are talking about bipolar and how do you heal and dealing with relationship recovery with Michelle Wienerker. And then on September 26th, we're dealing with treating trauma with tenderness. So in the whole month of September, we're working on healing and the importance of that. Because when we think about relationships, and I know I do a lot of relationship counseling, and relationships can get, in so many different ways, traumatic. But the first thing you can do when your relationship is really going is start to work on yourself. work on healing yourself. Because the more you're able to heal yourself, you can truly then hear and listen and respond accordingly to the stuff that people tell you. When you're not healed, how can I put it? Either you're talking from your trauma or you're talking from the worries of the future. So just have that note in your mind. All right, I will see you guys next week. And this has been the Bringing Intimacy Back show, where intimacy is real. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Bringing Intimacy Back, where intimacy is real. You can also find us at bringingintimacyback.com, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Dr. April Brown's 7-book series, Improving Intimacy, is now on Amazon. We'll see you next Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Don't forget to follow,